So I appreciate everybody jumping on here. We're going to walk through a decision framework for handling integration requests, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit as we get into the presentation here. To kick things off, though, I wanted to start just kind of introducing myself. Some of the names I recognize on the attendee list here, some are new faces, so I wanted to just sort of reintroduce who I am. I am the CEO and co-founder of Blended Edge. A little bit about my resume on there if you're interested in my background. We help software teams build out integrations within their product, similar to what an embedded iPaaS does. There's a number of companies like us involved in CSA. It's sort of like a supplement to what partnership teams are doing. We've talked about a lot of the same things. So kind of the important takeaway here is for the last, 7 or 8 years, I've been directly involved in building out these types of integrations, either as a vendor of companies helping them build them out, or for products that I've owned. So quite a bit of experience in all the pitfalls you run into, a lot of the problems you'll see, a lot of the challenges you'll run into. And even likewise before that, where I actually met my co-founder from Blended Edge, did a lot of enterprise software implementation, primarily around Adobe's enterprise stack. And you see a whole different version of integration challenges there, where you're doing more bespoke software and projects and kind of enterprise scale integration. So pretty wide range of experiences. And I've kind of funneled a lot of that into what we're going to talk about today, which I hope will be good takeaway information for you guys, all facing various versions of these problems in your respective companies. And what we're going to try to help you answer today is the age-old question that I think pretty much everybody has been involved in some shape or form in this meeting. And that's, how do you deliver all these integrations? Now, I will let you fill in your own four-letter word depending on how challenging this has been for you. But kind of this is the foundational question that we need to answer. And everybody sort of faces this long backlog of requests, whether they come from customers, they come from partners, they come from the CEO who insists on certain things get built. So we're going to walk through a decision framework for giving good answers to this question. Kind of before we get into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about a framework called I think it's pronounced Cunefin decision framework. If anybody speaks Welsh on the phone, you're welcome to correct my pronunciation. This is an older framework that I think IBM invented decades ago, but it does a really good job of helping you categorize problems. And the whole theory here is that before you can even understand how to solve a problem, you need to understand which type of problem it is. And that a lot of problems in business or in life in general is that people or companies or groups try to solve the wrong kind of problem, which actually creates more problems or creates failures to actually solve them. So kind of quickly going through this, starting on the bottom right, a simple problem is probably the most straightforward, easiest to understand. It's a problem that has a distinct, repeatable solution to it that can be taught to basically everybody. It's not, you don't need any expertise to do it. What do you do when you have a flat tire is a great example. Almost anybody can fix a flat tire or can be taught to fix a flat tire. Doesn't matter what road you're on, what kind of car you have, what the nature of the flat tire is, you pretty much do the same exact thing every single time. And solving those problems, especially at scale, are about building repeatable processes that you optimize to do them faster, easier, cheaper. Pretty common type of problem that we'll see. It's things like manufacturing and business. A complicated problem, if you move up to the top right, looks a little different. This is one that it sort of looks like a simple problem, except that the answer isn't necessarily straightforward. So what do you do when your engine is clunky? Most people, unless you're a mechanic, don't really know what to do. There's a lot of possible things that could be wrong, but there is a correct answer at the end of the journey somewhere, because there is actually some distinct thing wrong with your car. So the difference between a simple and a complicated problem is that to solve those, you need expertise that helps you form judgment for how to solve the problems. And that's why a good auto mechanic has sort of a process or an SOP that they can go through to go, okay, is it this, is it this, is it this? And over time, they especially build an expertise to know where they probably need to look. And then they go, oh, your radiator needs replaced, or you need a new fuel pump, or whatever the problem with the car is. And then there is a final answer at the end that they have the expertise to solve. You move over to complex problems. These are more abstract and more esoteric problems. Problems like, which car should you buy? There isn't actually really a specific final answer that is always right to that question. It's there's probably many right answers, and the parameters that make the answer correct are sort of unknown or competing with one another or abstract. So solving complex problems is a lot more about experimentation and kind of feeling out what the right answer is. And that's why you go test drive cars and kind of just see what you like. And ultimately, a big part of what you make on that final decision is largely driven by how did you feel when you drive the car and how did you like the salesperson. And those are not SOP problems that you can solve where you can, learn the instructions to do it. And then the bottom left are chaotic problems. And these are the ones that you're trying to solve something you've never seen before that's coming at you in real time, and there isn't really a way to react to those other than to just react. These are generally fairly rarer problems in the world, even if people maybe use this approach a little more often than they should. A good example is, what do you do if you're about to be in a car wreck? You see a car coming at you, or somebody's pulled out in front of you, whatever. You don't have time to experiment to see what the right thing you should do to steer away from that wreck is. You don't have time to check out your SOP about how to solve the problem. You have to react in real time and steer whatever your brain tells you is the right direction to go, which may or may not be right. So it's a lot more about command and control, react in the moment type of problem solving. The one in the middle, disorder, just means you don't know which of the four you're in. Now, this is kind of grad schooly, but I wanted to share it because there's a couple points related to what we're going to talk about here today that come out of this. One is that building an ecosystem strategy and a technology partnerships are a complex problem. You're dealing with relationships, you're dealing with business models that you're trying to bring together to solve common goals. That's a challenging thing to do, and it's generally a complex problem. I'm sure everybody on the call knows this, being in this world all day, every day. Related to that, though, part of building out your ecosystem strategy is having a successful integration program. And I say it with those words specifically because it doesn't necessarily mean building all the integrations. It means having a successful integration program. And that's a complicated problem because you can actually learn the best practices to do this, and there are final best practice ways to do it. So building out an SOP and having the right technology in place is actually how you solve that integration problem. However, most teams don't treat it that way. They treat it like it's chaotic. And that's how you get it, where you see people get into this mode where they're reacting to requests in real time. And this customer is yelling louder for this new integration coming across. And somebody else over here wants this other one solved. And you're constantly in this almost like a battle mode to figure out how to get all this stuff done. And nobody really knows what the best way to go forward is. And so our goal here is to empower you guys to go back to your teams, because these are cross-functional concerns, and start to develop some expertise into how to diagnose and deliver these integration requests so that you are equipped to handle them like they actually are, which are complicated problems. In other words, I'm going to give you a crash course in auto repair here in about 20 minutes. So we don't have time to actually build full experts, integration experts here on this call. So we're going to go through a lot of questions. And my goal here is to share, these are the things that you'll need to be able to confidently answer within your organizations. And it's going to be different answers for all of you because you all have different kinds of products and different kinds of businesses. But share all the questions and kind of the decision tree that these questions relate to each other through, so that you know what needs to be done to deliver on a framework to have this in your organization. And the 5 questions on here are kind of the main points we're going to hit. And then there's going to be sub questions under each of these that we're going to go into. Hopefully that communicates well enough on slides, because these are flat and this is kind of hierarchical information. So we'll definitely answer some questions at the end. But basically, we're going to go through, should it exist? Should we build it, or should somebody else, provide it, not build it, or should somebody else provide it? If someone else is going to do it, how do we help them? If we're going to do it, how are we going to do it? And then if we do it, how do we make sure it stands on its own 2 feet and doesn't blow up in our face? That's effectively what we're going to try to solve here. So we go into the first question: should this thing exist? A lot of companies or a lot of teams don't actually ask this question at all, and it really is the first one you should ask. The answer to that question is very, very dependent on your business model and very dependent on the nature of the request. But you should think of them, putting them in one of 2 buckets. Is it an integration request that you're considering a product integration, or bespoke or custom integration? Those are 2 kind of fundamentally different things, even though under the hood the tech looks about the same, but they accomplish different goals. And when you're evaluating whether you should build it, understanding which one is important. So a product integration is something that you build into the product. It's mostly or exactly the same for every single user who's going to turn it on, but might have some configurations to fill in the blanks, so to speak. Think about any product that integrates to Slack, for instance. Connecting to Slack is connecting to Slack is connecting to Slack. It's the same way every time, but you might have an option that says which channel in my Slack account do I want to output the messages for this integration. That would be the configuration. It works the same for everybody except for that little part. I'm not going to read all these questions. You guys can kind of read them as I'm going here, and these slides will come out later, but you should be basically looking at what is the ROI of this product integration as if you would look at any other product feature on your roadmap. It's a very similar kind of conversation. Bespoke integrations, on the other hand, are a little bit different. You may not have any bespoke integrations or any ability to handle those in your business model if you have a fairly low SaaS pricing point. Sometimes this is pretty tough to swing. If you don't have customers that typically pay professional services, this is tough to swing. But you have to go through basically the question of, is the juice worth the squeeze on a bespoke or a custom integration? A lot of times you'll see these in the enterprise, and a lot of times they do end up kind of being worth it because you can generate professional services revenue and there's profit in that. And it's just part of your business model is you have services. Sometimes even if you take a loss on a bespoke integration, it's still worth it. Think about, what if the biggest potential customer in your market says, yeah, I'll buy your product, but I want you to build this custom integration. You might still say yes, because the value of that logo, even if it's not a discrete ROI model, outweighs the cost that you're going to put into it. So it's a different set of questions that you're going to ask in these custom integration scenarios. So one of the easiest things you can do to repeatedly answer this question and consistently answer this question is to build a business case. Really what you're trying to do is define the nature of every single one of these integration requests in the same way, so that when you're looking at you're answering the question consistently and you're not politicking yourself into saying yes to this one and no to this one. If you collect the same information and organize it in the same way, it's a lot easier to make consistent decision making about the should question. Generally, your business case should define what the experience that you're going to create for the user is with the integration. What's the market opportunity? What's the ROI? Some high level requirements about what it is. We have, if you see this URL here, we have a free template you can download. We found it pretty helpful. We've shared it with a number of people, so definitely check that out. And then if you decide you should provide it, then the question becomes, who's going to provide it? Is it for us to do it, or is it for somebody else to do it? Basically, do we want to build it? Do we want to have a partner build it? Do we want to have a third party of some type build it? And really a lot of questions about how does this fit into your product strategy? How important is it to us versus the tech partner? Sometimes a given integration will be way more important to them than it is to you, or vice versa. How does it fit into our overall strategy and how we're thinking about our market and our ecosystem? And one way we help think about doing this is to bucket it in one of 4 categories. And you should really this is kind of an analysis of your integration opportunities or the ecosystem possibilities you have in the market. So decide, is this an imperative integration, which means your customers will expect you to have it. A lot of times, if you think about e-commerce integrations, are pretty common. If you have an e-commerce platform, your customers probably expect you to have an integration to QuickBooks or an integration to NetSuite. That's a very, very common one that if you don't have, you're kind of behind the market on. Imperative integrations are ones that you probably do want to own. I say probably because it's not 100% of the time, but those are the ones that if you're going to invest in building yourself or owning in-house, you should really think hard about. The important ones are ones that maybe you're not expected to have, but having them is a big positive for a customer, and that might be the tipping point for somebody deciding to go with you versus a competitor. There are opportunities for differentiation. Early in your integration journey, you probably don't own a ton of these, but over time, you'll probably gradually own more and more of them as you mature your ability to provide those integrations. Ecosystem adjacent ones are ones that, maybe if you're really, really scaling the heck out of your integration program, you want to provide these. But generally, these are ones that are valuable to your users, but not valuable enough for you to deal with. And that's when you start to provide means for other partners to build those integrations or customers to build them for you. And then ecosystem relevant ones are kind of self-explanatory. are not actually that valuable for you. You might get occasional requests for them, but they don't fit into your strategy. These ones are not worth building. They're not worth spending time on. And it's important to recognize there are certain integrations that'll kind of fall into this bucket. So next question, if it's not going to be us, we're not going to build it because we've determined maybe it's an adjacent integration and it's not worth putting the investment into today. What do we have to do to help somebody else do it? Who are those people going to be first? It could be a channel partner if you have that as part of your business strategy. It could be service providers that implement your product, or just consultants that implement like products or like services that's kind of adjacent to what you're doing. Do you even have a network of these people you can work with? You could partner with an iPaaS provider, and we'll talk about how you could use iPaaS later to provide these integrations yourself. But one approach you can take with iPaaS is just say, hey, you are a good fit for a lot of the types of customers that we have. There's a handful of integrations that we don't want to build, we don't want to provide, but we see you have connectors in your ecosystem for those already. Let's partner. Let's somehow fund or somehow get a connector to our product on your iPaaS. And then we'll refer business to you if somebody wants an integration that we're not willing to provide. So it's more of a partner relationship versus a vendor relationship with the iPaaS. And then of course you can enable the customer to build it themselves. And if you have customers that have development teams or are bigger and more mature, that's also a possibility. So if you want to support all of these things, you don't get to kind of wash your hands and say, we're not gonna worry about this now. We're not building this integration. You still have some responsibilities. You think about what your API strategy is. You have to provide an API. You have to roadmap it. You have to communicate that roadmap. You have to make sure you understand how you support the API, because that's how somebody's going to build and support an integration to you, is through that API. Which means you also have to think a lot about what your developer experience is and the tooling you provide developers. Developer experience is a word kind of derivative of user experience, which just means how do you help devs work with your API? Collaborative product development and customer support with those partners. How are you going to work with them to make sure they're getting it done? And then sort of what are your contractual obligations? You probably are going to have SLAs or some amount of commitment to those partners that the API is going to stay up and that data is going to keep going in and out. So we're running a little quick here. I want to make sure I don't run out of time. There's one question here that just showed up in the chat, and I wanted to stop and answer some questions before we go to what happens if we're going to build it ourselves. What are some of the best strategies or ways to engage a given developer community? To give a really fast answer to that, and then at the end we can dive into this further if you'd like. I actually think one of the most effective things I've seen companies doing, and more as of lately, is hiring somebody who is specifically responsible for developer relationships and building a developer community, because it's a different type of person to engage with than you're typically thinking about with your customers or like a marketing person. This is basically somebody who their job is to go out to the developer communities and generate excitement from an engineering perspective about what you're doing. I'll have to think of some companies that are doing that as a good example, but that's a strategy that I've seen executed more and more recently, and I think it's a very effective one to try. Okay, so second half down this tree, what if we're going to build it ourselves? What are we getting into? First, you have to decide when you're going to build each one. It's a road mapping conversation. You have to decide how you're going to build it. You have to decide how you're going to get people to use it, because now you spent money on it and you don't get your return on that investment, then it wasn't a very successful project. And you got to understand how you support it, because it's not just about building it and providing it to close that deal. That is a live integration that you have to keep updated. You have to keep healthy. You have to make sure it continues to deliver value for your customers, and that's not an easy task. The prioritization, the way we like to look at that in terms of road mapping is, again, bucketing into categories. And these are imperfect categories, but it helps you break down what otherwise is just a big pile of asks. If you look at a priority matrix based on the effort it's going to take to build the integration on one axis and the impact it's going to have for the organization, which is probably a financial impact. Generally speaking, this is how you would categorize your integration opportunities that you've committed to building yourself. Low effort integrations are always a good thing to build, because Low effort means you get them out quickly, they deliver value quickly. Now, obviously, the high impact low efforts are going to be better than the low impact low efforts, but more value delivered into the market faster is generally what should be your bias. There's a little bit of gray area about whether a low should happen before a high impact medium effort, for instance. This is an imperfect framework, but bucket your opportunities in these ways and then start to use that as a way to negotiate what happens in what order. The only ones I would say you absolutely do not want to build are the ones that have low impact and take medium or high effort. The low effort ones are all right because you can kind of crank those out really quick and dirty. You will just end up in a money pit in the bottom right of this graph. And having that business case that we talked about earlier is going to give you the parameters you need to answer whether something is a high impact or a low impact or a high effort or a low effort. All that information is designed to standardize how you think about this so that you can categorize accordingly. Then the question comes, how do you build it? Because there's a lot of different ways you can build or provide an integration for your customers. One is an iPaaS or an integration platform as a service. And this is when you guys would be the customer of the iPaaS, you would license it on behalf of your customers, and you are going to use it to build integrations for them to your system. This is a pretty good fit for if you're going to do bespoke integrations. I would not recommend custom building bespoke integrations unless you have a very, very good reason to. But your professional services team might do well to have an iPaaS in their pocket to deliver on those requests from customers if you're going to say yes to them. There's a class of iPaaS called embedded iPaaS, and this is where you take that same technology and sort of white label it into your product to expose to your users in different ways to give them the integrations. The way these look is very different depending on the vendor, but basically what they're trying to do is take that same experience that you'd have as a customer of an iPaaS and expose it through your product to your customers. Taking it a little further down the complexity scale, you have integration frameworks that you can embed in your software. Now we're starting to get into more developer use cases than like citizen integrator use cases. Similar type of value that an embedded iPaaS provides, but because it's a framework, it is a lot more fundamentally embeddable into your software product, and you have a lot more opportunities for customization and dealing with complexity. For what it's worth, our product is kind of towing the lines between embedded iPaaS and an integration framework. We're kind of trying to split the difference there and borrow from the benefits of both. And then, of course, you can custom build it. And sometimes it does make sense. If you're dealing with really unique requirements, you might need to custom build it. You might have to have developers write the thing from scratch. I would definitely say customers overbiased or companies overbiased to doing this when they shouldn't, but there are right times to do it, especially when you have really hard problems to solve, really unique requirements, or there just isn't integration technology like a framework and iPaaS on the market that's going to meet your needs for one way or the other. This is also a good thing to do very early in the business. So starting to invest in an iPaaS to be kind of the main mechanism for your long-term integration strategy, it's not a cheap or easy decision to make. You're making a pretty big commitment for a vendor, and it's not necessarily a wrong thing to do, but early on in the business, you may not want to bite that off. So even though it's not the optimal way to build the integration, like pre-Series A, you actually might want to just custom build your first few. You'll experience the pain, you'll understand what the value is, but you'll end up getting rid of those later, probably, and replacing them with more enterprise or more sophisticated versions of them. But that's a good way to start off. Next, you have to answer how are you going to get people to use it. And there's sort of two buckets of what that looks like. One is the user experience. How do you enable a customer to use it? What's your configuration look like? How do you make it easy for them to turn it on? Do they want to see a whole bunch of data flying through, or do they just want to see the green light that it's turned on and it's working well? Where's the logging going? Who's actually watching that? Is that internal for you guys? Is that the customer watching it? How are they going to interact with support? How do you teach your support team to help them with integration problems? What is your user's experience dealing with that integration that you provided them? And then, of course, there's distribution, which is how do you get people to find it? Are you providing an integration marketplace? How do you talk to your sales team about selling that integration? How do you talk to the partner team about selling that integration and the partner that the integration's to? This is all about how you help your customer understand what the thing is before they get into it. User experience is about how they use it. And then finally, you really have to ask yourself how you're going to support it. And the way I like to describe this is just to talk about what the complexity of support is. So first, your customer is going to expect a few things from you, and they're not reasonable things, but that's what customers do. They expect 100% uptime. They don't care that the thing goes down. They need that integration 100% of the time to work. Now, it's not going to be 100% uptime, but it's going to be your responsibility to give them confidence that it's going to be pretty darn close to that. They expect pretty complex things to happen in those integrations, and they expect them to happen with being shielded from that complexity. They're going to expect you to proactively address issues when they do come up. They don't want to call you to say the integration's broke. They're going to want to have it broken or fixed before they realize it's broken. And they're going to want consistency across all the integrations. If they have a QuickBooks integration on one side and a HubSpot integration on the other, and the way those work are totally different, because this one's with a partner and this one's custom built into part of your application, and it's just a very inconsistent experience for them, they're not going to be happy. Part two of this is what your customer doesn't care about. And this is important to understand, because when you're going to build a model of empathy for these customers, especially in your support team, with how you deal with these problems. One is that integration's hard. Customer doesn't care. To them, it should be easy. Integration is not your core business, but you're going to have to provide it for them. They don't care. So they don't care that this is kind of a distraction to your product team or a deviation from what your core product does. They don't care that it's going to be probably free to them. You may charge them for integration, but most commonly these days, people don't. They don't care that it's going to cost you money, but you're not going to charge them anything for it. And they don't care because they did something wrong and it broke the integration. And I can't emphasize this one enough. If you hear people saying, well, I did X, Y, and Z, and it shouldn't affect the integration in any way, it almost 100% of the time does, and is directly related to the problem. Customer doesn't understand that, customer doesn't care. So you have to be prepared to absorb these challenges if you're going to provide integrations. And then I just like to share some principles for how you build supportable integrations. One is consistency. You want them all built similarly. They're obviously all different integrations. They're all going to behave somewhat differently. One's to a REST API, one's to an old school SOAP web services API. But as much as possible, make them appear consistent to your customer. Observability, you need to know what's happening in those integrations. It's one thing to wire up the APIs so that data can flow. It's another thing to know that data is flowing, know that 5% of the time you're dropping data on the floor, et cetera. So you have to have observability built into it. You have to have flexibility and the appropriate amount of flexibility so that you can adapt to individual customer needs without building a custom one every single time. I usually say the 80-20 rule is a good place to start. 80% of the integration should be consistent for all customers. And then the 20% is what you expose as configuration to tweak or customize. And then embeddability. Most of the time, your customer doesn't want to adopt another product. Now, I know I said there's a place for partnering with an iPaaS to handle some of the lower priority integrations, but generally speaking, the preference for your customer is going to be, it's just part of your product. It's just native to what you're doing, and they don't have to have a new contract with a new software vendor over here just to get that integration deployed. The bottom line with supportability, though, is you're going to win or lose it when you decide how you build it. If you make bad decisions about how you build integrations, they're going to be immensely harder to support down the road. So really, really put a lot of care into the how you build it question, because that's going to be a direct impact on how you can answer all of these questions. All right, so try to go through this really, really fast. I will stay on if we want to get into some questions here, but I want to bring it home. So given that this is a call of mostly partner professionals, I wanted to give you guys some takeaways for what all of this means to you and how you can use it to hopefully be valuable to your organizations. One is, first, take a look around and recognize, using that Cunefin framework, how is your organization actually treating building integrations? Are they treating it like a complicated problem? And there's still struggles in doing that, but you're at least on the right track. Or are you operating chaotically? Are you reacting in real time to things that are coming across the wire? Because none of this matters until you can get the organization in the right headspace to be solving it in the right way, which is that as a complicated problem. Then work on developing a methodology for delivering them. Now, you may have the ability in your organization as a partnership leader to influence this. You may have to enlist other executives in the organization to have some buy-in here. This is going to be a cross-functional methodology no matter which way you swing it. So champion building that methodology, use these questions in this decision tree that we walked through today, and figure out what your version of answering all these questions is going to look like. Then create an integration roadmap. That's really a deliverable. That's kind of a concrete thing that you can go, okay, now we've made some decisions about how we're going to say yes and no to these things. And even if you deviate from it, when a request comes in, you can at least be working off the same page with the rest of your organization in terms of how you thought you wanted to prioritize things. And then get involved with the how to build it decision making. Don't let that just be the CTO's decision or the engineering team's decision. Again, integration is a cross-functional concern for a software company. You want to be involved as the partner leader in making those decisions, understanding that your requirements are going to differ very much from somebody else's in the organization, but you should exert some influence there. So that is the content I have today. I hope it was helpful, even though I went really, really fast. Some contact information on the slide here. Certainly, if you're interested in talking to us about helping to solve these problems, this is what we do all day, every day. So reach out to me. I try to stay fairly active in the Slack too, so you can just shoot me a DM or follow us on one of the social media channels. I can stay for some questions. Lindsay, I didn't know if you wanted me to keep the recording going for this part. Okay, yes, please. So Phil, I see if there's time at the end, can we go back to the slide that has the 4 quadrants of where an integration should sit? I believe one of them was ecosystem adjacent. Yeah, we can. We also have a blog post on that on our blog, which I can share afterwards in Slack. All right. I mean, I will let everybody get back to their day here. Like I said, I'll stick around for a little bit if anybody wants to stick around, but that's about the content I have. I appreciate everybody jumping on. It's been a pleasure presenting to you guys again, and hopefully this was helpful. Reach out if I can dive into anything more.